On today's episode of Pathmonk Presents, I got a very special guest with me joining today. Please welcome Lex, who is the head of marketing at Aparito. Lex, thanks so much for joining us today on the podcast. I'm looking forward to learning more about you and your growth story and ultimately all the really great things you guys are doing at Aparito. So thank you again for taking the time.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me, Maria.
Yeah, absolutely. So for all of our listeners on here, tell us, what is Aparito and what do you guys essentially solve for your clients?
Sure. So we are a company dedicated to digitizing clinical trials. So essentially what we're trying to do is make clinical trials more accessible for patients, particularly with rare disease, where disease burden can be quite high. So traveling to clinics for assessments can be quite stressful for them. We're aiming to make that easier through the use of apps, through wearable devices, through video assessments. So patients can do their assessments in the comfort of their own home, supported by their caregivers, and just make the whole process easier for them. From the sponsor side, that then means you're getting more frequent data, better quality data points as well, because it's a more natural setting in which these assessments are taking place. And then our overall aim is to keep patients engaged with clinical trials to make sure that drug efficacy and effectiveness can be measured properly and get drugs to market faster for them.
Yeah, definitely. That's really great. I love how, it's making it like more not only digitized, but like just making it easier overall for with clinical trials and as well as for the patients. So since your clients are mainly in the healthcare industry, how do they typically find you then? Would you say it's more through referrals? Is it word of mouth? Is it inbound digital marketing? Give us an insight.
So a lot of it seems to come from things like conferences, exhibitions, where we'll give talks, particularly in terms of the really exciting, innovative stuff that we're doing with Aparito in terms of video assessments and trying to not just digitize existing scales at existing clinics and put those into a digital format through a video assessment. It's more about the potential and the possibility of what else could we measure that means something to patients and is more meaningful to them, rather than just taking established tests and, as I say, digitizing them. It's a difference between saying we have postal mail, so we'll translate that into email. Let's think about what would we do if we discovered electricity tomorrow? How would we change how we do things? We're trying to think more like that with it. One of the things that we've seen a lot of probably in the last 12 months is people really starting to come to us off the back of publications and white papers that we produce. So with a very dedicated team, my CEO in particular, Dr. Ellen Half-Davis, she writes and contributes to a lot of publications, and those gather a lot of interest because of the topics that she brings to the table. So we then tend to distribute those quite far and wide, predominantly through paid media. LinkedIn's a big platform for us, as you can imagine, with B2B, using some of the more innovative ad formats they've got on there for distribution. And probably what we find is that the category in which we sit in terms of decentralized clinical trials is still relatively new. But these other fringe areas where we're really starting to see interest taking off is things like eCOA development, which is looking at clinical outcome assessments and what can we do with those as different and innovative. And people discover that through distribution, through paid channels, and then they come and search us through brand generally off the back of that. So whereas organic search can be huge for certain categories, it's not particularly big for us because it's still quite a new category that's coming together and really been defined probably since the pandemic. Obviously, that flipped everything and accelerated stuff quite quickly, healthcare in particular, for obvious reasons. There's vaccines that need to be tested quickly across a huge population. This was the technology that was ideal for doing so. But as it's matured out and people have started to then think about what else could we do and not just have people filling in forms on a phone, that's where the interest has really been in terms of what could you do with video capture? What can you do with a wearable device like a Garmin? How can you measure steps, sleep, quality of life overall like that? And there's a lot of interest pouring in terms of the work that we're doing around that.
Oh, that's really great overall. So in terms of the white papers, so for any of our listeners out there, can they go to the website to download these white papers, or do they need to, subscribe, any newsletters? Because you guys are not only like thought leaders within your industry, but you're also going a step further and educating, which is amazing. So for our listeners out there, can they be able to access any of these resources that you've mentioned and elaborated on?
Yeah, so the white papers are available through the website. We link to all the journals and publications that we're involved in as well from there. So a lot of the time we'll direct people off to where the publications are. If it's a proprietary white paper we've written, it's available to download from us. We also, for our email subscribers, we always send out the white paper as soon as it lands, so they get the first view of it without any sort of gates or forms to fill in. as a bit of a thank you for being signed up for us to make sure they get access to it. And then in terms of the topics that we've built out over this year into next year, it's been based predominantly on taking customer feedback and really listening to what's going on at the customer side of things, finding out what's of interest to them, what are their learnings, and then looking at that when it comes back into the product team and saying, all right, so these are the kind of things they're interested in. This is what's not working for them quite as well. And this is the stuff that they'd like to know a bit more about, or they're asking questions about. And that helps us really develop out the roadmap of what content do we want to put out there.
Sweet, awesome. Thanks for letting us know. I'm going to go subscribe and follow Aparito because all of this is super interesting. You have me hooked. So, yeah.
You should. We do some cool stuff. If I do say so myself, it's pretty cool what we do.
Yeah, definitely. And it's contributing to the greater good of society as well. Like these are important conversations that I think need to be happening more often. So it's really great what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's quite nice to have a job where you feel like it's genuinely making a difference to the people who use the products. I think we're quite lucky as well in terms of we have a number of different customers. So we've got like the sponsors, but then we've also got the patients who actually are the end user of the products as well. So if they don't engage with it and really get and buy into it, then the sponsor relationship isn't going to be as strong. So we do take a lot of patient feedback into the product roadmap as well. And that's a really important area of development for us.
Yeah, it is. But overall, it's really great, especially, with this tool. It's really helping with, within hospitals overall. So it's awesome what you guys are doing for the patients. So now I want to talk about you as a leader. So with being the head of marketing for Aparito, and then overall, with all the things that you manage within this role, elaborate on not only what you typically do on a day-to-day basis, but just overall your growth story and how you ended up in this company.
Sure. So I started off in digital agencies. So going back even further, I started off as a journalist. So I always enjoyed copywriting, and that kind of fell naturally towards moving into marketing. I spent a lot of time working in marketing agencies for probably about 10 years in total. And then I took a chance moving to Aparito back in 2021. Like most people, I think pandemic just made me reassess a few things in terms of like what do I want to do with my career, where do I want to spend my time. And the story really appealed to me. The founders are exceptional people who are really driven, and that passion for what they do really spoke to me as well. Like I love being driven by a team who really want to do stuff and go out there and win. So that was a big part of the reason I joined. When I first joined, I was essentially taking everything I'd done within an agency and then applying it for myself. So it was almost like I was saying, right, well, I've been giving advice for all these years to clients. I'm now going to see if it actually works when I apply it, and I really hope it does. So I kind of went in with a 90-day plan and said, I'm going to work on doing diagnosis, building a strategy, putting together some tactics, and that'll be measured with some really good, clear KPIs. And I'm going to have 2, maybe 3 KPIs that I work to. And that's essentially what I proposed. So I tried to take to the senior management team what I wanted to do, how I wanted to be measured in terms of impact. And they were very supportive of that, predominantly because I just sort of explained what I was trying to do, how it ties to revenue, how it ties to the growth of the business, why we need to prioritize a certain amount of short term, but actually I want to spend the majority of the effort, the budget, and the resource on the long term, and gave a really good explanation of why that was the case. And then I've had probably the best week of my first 3 months was just speaking to customers, just doing constant conversations with them, because I get to come in and go, so I'm new, what's your experience been like? And I got the good, I got the bad, I got some of the ugly, which again was fantastic. I got to build out a clear picture of what problems do we solve, what other problems are out there that we don't address that we could potentially branch off into, and then also the kind of stuff that we really do need to keep doing and reiterating that are our core strengths. So that helped us build a really clear idea of like what's our positioning going forward, because there's lots of different things we could do. So we said we're going to position as clinical outcome assessment development with video assessments as our kind of key product differentiator. Nobody else does this, we do this. We are going to focus heavily on that. And certainly in the last 6 to 9 months, we've really seen the pipeline of inbound leads come through really clearly with, we know you do video, we love what you do, we've seen you at this conference, we've read this publication you put out there, and we're probably consistently around 70-75% of our leads are inbound. which coming from 30 to 33% when I first joined. So we've seen a huge shift in terms of that inbound intent, which has been really exciting to watch that come to life.
Yeah, definitely. Like that's really is exciting. And the one thing I also really love is where you were capitalizing on, meeting with the customers, talking with them, having those conversations. And that's a really huge part of marketing that a lot of people tend to forget. It's like you have to get down to the level with the customers, hearing the good, the bad, the ugly in order to be able to enhance the product, to be able to move forward as well. And I think it also allows for you to have that human element as well, where it's like, hey, like I'm calling you because I really want to make sure like that it's working, but I also want to build a relationship with you. I want to make sure that our product is going to help you not only with what you need, but also moving forward for other patients. So I think it's really great, like from like hearing like a lot of different stories to be able to move forward with the product as well. And then with, being given, the tools to really be able to create the strategy that has been so successful. And I mean, and from what you explained, it's been incredible to see like the massive amount of growth, especially with the inbound, like the overall increasing numbers. So that's really great what you guys are doing overall.
Yeah, it's been exciting because a lot of the time I think it's when you go into a new role, it's tempting to jump into tactics and just go with these channels, these ads, these messages, and just run with it. But being able to take that time to just talk to people and then do that piece of segmentation, but then also the positioning piece was super helpful. And then I could go out and ask them like, where do you spend your time? What do you read? Which social channels do you use? And they're then telling me firsthand. So it's like, I don't need to waste money playing around with Facebook ads because I know they're not really spending time there. I'm going to stick, the farm basically on LinkedIn because I know you're hanging out there a lot because every single one of you has told me you're on LinkedIn and you're active. So yeah, we've seen that. We've tested stuff obviously just to validate it, but the research has held true. We've seen huge jumps in the generation through the platforms that people tell us that they use. So that was good because they told me what was actually true.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now we're getting close to the end of our interview, and I'm going to ask you some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Oh, I think so. Go on.
Awesome. What is the last book that you read?
The last one that I finished, I've got about 3 different ones on the go at the moment. I think the last one I finished was Black Swan by Nassim Taleb.
Black Swan. I've heard of that book. It's on my list. So I'm super
so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. It's amazing. Now, if there were no boundaries in technology, you could do whatever you wanted. What would be the one thing that you would want to have fixed in your role today as a marketer?
I would say visibility of what people send to each other through things like WhatsApp and Slack and those internal messaging channels, because I think loads of interesting stuff gets shared around internally through companies like that, and you just don't see it until it pops up as a direct hit on the website and they download something. So I would love to have those digital footprints through Slack and WhatsApp and those sort of channels.
Yeah, no, that would be really cool. That I agree with. So now we're at the end of our interview today. And I want to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. But I also want to give you the last word. If anyone were to forget about everything we've talked about today in your interview, what is the one thing you want them to remember about your company overall?
We digitize clinical trials.
Again, you guys are a really great company. Thanks so much for taking the time to not only elaborate, but also educate. Thank you for educating and explaining, what you guys are doing in the healthcare field. And ultimately, I'm super excited for what you guys have in store. And I'm looking forward to keeping up on your growth journey. So thanks again.
I appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yeah, absolutely. For all of our listeners out there, check us out next week on Pathmonk Accelerate.